Hello, my name is Lauryn, and this is my presentation based on my dissertation research exploring retirement, identity, and well-being. In particular, I look at how retired adults made sense of retirement as a psychological transition and how this related to their sense of self, mental well-being, and their attitudes towards support. What happens to who we are when work ends? This is a major question that sort of led to the ideas around this research. Retirement is often talked about as a time of freedom, but for many people, it also raises deeper questions about identity, purpose, and belonging. This study aimed to explore how individuals actually experience this transition in their own words, the struggles they face, or the positive sides. And we wanted to explore an important tension between work ending and what happens to our sense of self. Exploring literature on this topic shows contrasting research. Traditionally, retirement has been understood through role loss perspectives, where leaving work is associated with loss of identity, loss of structure, and loss of social status. This is important because employment often provides not just income, but also a sense of purpose, routine, and social recognition. As a result, retirement has been linked to risks such as reduced well-being, loss of meaning, and adjustment difficulties. This reflects several theoretical perspectives. Role exit theory highlights the potential challenges of disengaging from long-held roles, particularly where identity is strongly tied to work. From a developmental perspective, Erikson's model also positions later life as a period of reflection. Through his integrity versus despair stage, adults reflect on their lives, seeking a sense of coherence, wisdom, and fulfillment to avoid feelings of bitterness, regret, and wasted opportunity. However, contrasting research suggests a more flexible, nuanced view. Rather than being a uniform experience of loss or reflection on past life, retirement can also involve adaptation, the development of new roles, and continued identity growth. Contrasting theories around this, such as continuity theory, suggests individuals maintain core aspects of the self by adapting existing values, interests, and relationships into new contexts. Additionally, the changing work landscape, such as flexible working, longer working roles, and the slow transition or bridge employment, changes the way retirement is experienced today. Overall, this suggests retirement outcomes may depend less on the transition itself and more on how individuals are able to maintain or reconstruct a meaningful sense of self through this period. This research holds specific implications for counselling and practice with this age group facing this transition. Retirement is not simply a financial or practical transition, but a significant psychological one. As we've seen, it can shape how individuals experience identity, purpose, and overall well-being. This is particularly relevant for counselling practice, as changes or disruptions in role and routine can affect how individuals understand themselves, their place in the world, and their sense of meaning. In some cases, this may increase vulnerability to low mood, isolation, or loss of direction. At the same time, retirement can also present opportunities for growth, suggesting that support should not be based on negative assumptions, but instead recognise both the challenges and the potential for development through new roles, new purpose, and new routine. With an ageing population, more individuals are navigating this transition, making it increasingly important for practitioners to understand the diverse ways retirement is experienced. It also raises important questions around individuals maintaining a sense of purpose and belonging, and how they engage with support. Research around this age group shows mixed behaviours in help seeking and that it may not always follow a traditional pathway. Given these theoretical and practical considerations, the aim of this study was to explore how retirement shapes identity, well-being, and mental health perceptions, specifically help-seeking behaviours. In particular, the research focused on how individuals experience retirement in relation to their sense of self and their psychological well-being. Rather than assuming retirement is either positive or negative, the study aimed to understand the complexity of the experience from the perspectives of those who had gone through it. This led to the use of a qualitative approach to explore these experiences in depth, following two research questions. The first, how does personal identity change following retirement? And second, how does the role transition of retirement affect individuals' mental health? This study used a qualitative design method involving semi-structured interviews conducted online to explore participants' experience in depth. A total of 10 participants were recruited using opportunity sampling through posters and online advertisement in local areas. All participants were retired within the last 10 years, allowing the study to focus on relatively recent retirement experience. We also included cases with retirement and returning to work, as they had gone through a retirement experience. All participants were based in Wales, which provided insight into retirement experiences within a specific regional context, where factors such as community, structure, and access to services may shape adjustment. Additionally, we had an exclusion criteria of a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or dementia due to the ethical implications around informed consent and the potential issues with information recall. Interviews were conducted online, recorded, and then transcribed verbatim to ensure accuracy. These data was analysed using thematic analysis following a Brunner and Clark framework to identify patterns and shared meaning across participants' accounts. Ethical considerations were addressed throughout, including informed consent, confidentiality, and participants' right to withdraw from the study at any time. This was done through a number of email chains and emailing participants transcriptions when completed to ask if they wanted to make any amendments or withdraw from the study. Analysis of the interviews identified 4 key themes, each broken down into 2 sub-themes, reflecting how participants experienced retirement and their attitudes towards mental health and help seeking. Firstly, identity beyond work was broken down into 2 sub-themes, work as one part of identity and reconstructing identity through new roles and values. For many participants, identity extended beyond employment, with employment being one small part of who they were. However, for other participants, identity was closely intertwined to their work role, meaning transitions through retirement could be more disruptive. Although overall what was often missed was their sense of being valued or needed. For the second theme, freedom and adjustment, this was broken down into 2 sub-themes, freedom and autonomy, and negotiating change, timing, and routine. This was associated with increased freedom and autonomy for some participants, but this was not always straightforward, as some participants found it challenging to adapt to the lack of routine and structure in post-retirement life. Others referenced the freedom and autonomy they had over their time and choices with what to do and enjoyed this. Thirdly, wellbeing through connection was strongly linked to staying active, maintaining relationships, and having a sense of purpose. This was broken down into two sub-themes: staying active and engaged, and social connection, usefulness, and belonging. It was evident through a number of participants had taken up other roles such as volunteering, hobbies with more responsibility, or membership in community groups to fill this sense of purpose, usefulness, and social connection. A number of participants also spoke about getting into new hobbies or activities that they had wanted to do but previously not had availability to do so. Finally, our last theme was around mental health perceptions, broken down into managing difficulties independently and conditional openness to professional support. Participants often preferred to manage difficulties independently, relying on personal coping strategies or informal support, such as speaking to a friend, with professional help typically viewed as a later option in more distressing situations. These findings show retirement as both a potentially challenging and as an opportunity for growth, highlighting a complex and non-uniform experience. So overall, the findings suggest that retirement is not experienced as a uniform loss of identity. This challenges traditional role loss perspectives that position retirement as inherently disruptive. Instead, identity was experienced in different ways across participants. For some individuals, work roles were strongly integrated into their sense of self, meaning retirement had greater potential to disrupt identity. However, for others, identity was less tied to occupation, with participants describing themselves in terms of personal qualities, family relationships, or other interests that extended beyond work. Importantly, many participants demonstrated flexibility in adapting core aspects of their identity into new roles following retirement, such as volunteering or group membership through community groups. This suggested that identity in later life is often multidimensional, with individuals drawing on multiple sources of self rather than relying solely on occupational identity. Adjustment to retirement was also shaped by how individuals experienced this transition. Participants who described retirement as voluntary or well-timed often reported more positive experiences, particularly where they felt a sense of control. Similarly, those who had already established routines before entering retirement appeared to adjust more smoothly, whereas those with more work-centred identities or less social groups described greater uncertainty. Access to meaningful roles, routine, and social engagement also appeared to play a key role, suggesting that adjustment is shaped by opportunities to maintain purpose and structure beyond employment. In addition, well-being was strongly linked to purpose, belonging, and opportunities for social contribution, supporting more flexible models of well-being and social identity perspectives. Finally, participants' accounts highlighted important patterns in help-seeking behaviour. Many described a preference for managing difficulties independently, often relying on personal coping strategies or informal support such as speaking to a friend. Professional help was typically viewed as a last resort option when things became more serious. This suggests that help seeking in later life may be shaped not only by barriers such as stigma, but also by values around independence, privacy, and self-reliance. These findings have several important implications for counselling practice. Firstly, support during retirement transitions may be most effective when addressing identity, purpose, and belonging, rather than focusing solely on emotional distress. Practitioners may benefit from supporting individuals in reconstructing a sense of self beyond work, particularly where identity has been strongly tied to occupational roles. Secondly, the findings highlight that the importance of recognising variation in how retirement is experienced. Counselling approaches should be flexible and tailored, taking into account factors such as perceived control over retirement, levels of preparedness, and access to meaningful roles or activities outside of work. In addition, participants' accounts of help seeking suggest that support should align with preferences for independence and self-reliance, rather than positioning counselling as a last resort or for someone in serious distress. Services may be more effective when framed as an extension of existing coping strategies or low-level interventions. This also highlights the potential value of early or preventative support, as well as more accessible, community-based approaches, which may feel more acceptable to individuals who do not typically engage with formal mental health services. Overall, these findings suggest that counselling support in later life should move beyond negative-based models and instead focus on facilitating identity, connection, and meaningful engagement. Several limitations should be acknowledged with this research project. Firstly, the sample was self-selecting, meaning participants may have been more engaged, reflective, or socially connected than those who did not take part. This may have resulted in findings that reflect more positive or adaptive retirement experiences. Secondly, the study relied on retrospective accounts, meaning participants were reflecting on past experiences of retirement. As a result, some accounts may have been shaped by later adjustment or reinterpretation over time. Finally, the sample was context-specific, with all participants based in Wales. This was done to collect rich data about a particular population, but may have limited the transferability of findings to a wider population. Future research could build on this by adapting to a longitudinal approach, exploring how identity, well-being, and help-seeking evolves over time. For example, interviewing individuals before retirement, during the transition, and in the months following retirement could provide a more dynamic understanding of the processes individuals go through. This would also allow for deeper insight into how adjustment unfolds rather than relying solely on retrospective accounts. So to conclude, retirement was not experienced as a uniform or purely negative transition. Instead, it reflected a complex process shaped by identity, context, and opportunity. These findings directly address the research question by showing that retirement is not a single transition. While work remained an important part of identity for some individuals, many participants demonstrated the ability to maintain or reconstruct a sense of self beyond employment. Adjustment was shaped by factors such as perceived control, preparedness, and access to meaningful roles, highlighting that retirement outcomes are not fixed but influenced by available resources and experiences. Overall well-being was closely tied to purpose, belonging, and opportunity for social connection. And ultimately, these findings suggest that retirement is not simply about leaving work, but about whether individuals are able to sustain a meaningful sense of self beyond this. Thank you for listening to my presentation. If you'd like to discuss anything further or have any questions, please feel free to reach out.